Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the 10th inning with Nick Mattos.
Oh, put me in cold. I'm ready to play today. Put me in cold. I'm ready to play today. Look at me. I can be center field.
Welcome to the 10th inning. I'm Nick Mattos in the Lethal Weapon 2 studio with my producer Dave Perkins. And today, joining me from the San Diego sports leader, the mighty 1090, is my good friend Danny Reiter. Hey, Danny, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Nick, always appreciate you giving me a chance to come on. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well, Danny. The weather's cleared up here a little bit here in the Northern California, and very happy to have a couple of days of sunshine. And last week, I was really looking forward to the AFC-NFC championship games there, Dan. And that first game there, the Green Bay Packers traveled to Atlanta to play the Atlanta Falcons in the last game of the Georgia Dome. And the game ended up a little lopsided, Danny. The score was quite a bit lopsided. Atlanta defeated Green Bay 44-21. But early in that game, Danny, I thought Green Bay had an opportunity to score, and they didn't do it. They missed a field goal there. Mason Crosby had a medium-range field goal and missed it. And after that, the Packers were driving. They were deep in Atlanta territory, Danny, and their fullback fumbled at the 10-yard line. Atlanta recovered. And basically, that really took them out of the game. They were losing 24-0 at halftime.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game where Atlanta got in their offensive rhythm right away, and you could tell Green Bay was not well equipped to defend them. And it goes into that same light, you know, we kind of talked about it back when we did that college football podcast about what happened with Ohio State against Clemson. And it's the same kind of thing where when you're in a game like that, you can't waste opportunities that are that good. Now, I'm not saying if Crosby hits the field goal or if the Packers get a touchdown there, they win the game. But suddenly there's so much pressure on them the rest of the game, and they fell behind in a hole that they just couldn't get themselves out of, and Atlanta just torched them from then.
You know, I thought it was a great omen for the Green Bay Packers that Jordy Nelson was able to play, and Jordy looked pretty good, and I was impressed with his gumption there, Danny. I know he was wearing a flak jacket around his ribs to protect him, but you know, he was not the problem. The problem is that Green Bay just didn't seem to grasp the moment. There was a lot of times where they got pressure on Aaron Rodgers. I believe he was pressured 21 times in that game. That tied a record. I think the other two quarterbacks that were pressured that many times in a big game like that was in the Super Bowl the previous year. Cam Newton against the Denver Broncos got pressured 21 times, and then I believe it was in 2011, Eli Manning for the New York Giants got pressured. Those are 21 times you're pressured when you drop back. That's a lot, Dan. You know, and I was disappointed that Green Bay didn't do a better job of protecting Aaron Rodgers.
Well, that's how Atlanta's defense is set up. I mean, Vic Beasley led the league in sacks this year, and part of the reason that they're able to do that is once they get a lead on people, then they can really let their pass rushers go at them. I mean, it's kind of like, if you remember the Greatest Show on Turf, the St. Louis Rams, they had a similar kind of defense where, you know, if you were in a tight, low-scoring game, you could probably torch them. But it's when their offense gets going that then they get after you. And I think that's what happened there. Atlanta got their lead, and then they could really rear back and go right at Aaron Rodgers, really get some pressure on him. They couldn't run the ball, and it knocked them out of their offensive rhythm. And it was a little surprising how the Packers' O-line, which had been very good, at least in pass blocking throughout the late stages of the regular season into the playoffs, struggled. It was more just a testament to how well Atlanta played. I think Atlanta, once they jumped on them early, there wasn't much that Green Bay could do.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And Atlanta's offense right now, Danny, is really performing well. And Matt Ryan, I believe most people, and I certainly believe that he is going to be the most valuable player this year in the NFL. And he had a wonderful game, and he was on most of his passes. He was very accurate. I believe he was 27 for 38, 392 yards, 4 touchdowns passing, and he ran for a touchdown for the first time in a long time. And he set an NFL record there because I believe it was his fourth consecutive playoff game, Danny, that he's thrown at least 3 touchdown passes in. And so he's going to the Super Bowl here for his first time. And I believe these are the 2 best quarterbacks. If I remember, I saw some stat, Danny, where Matt Ryan and Tom Brady, the 2 quarterbacks here in the Super Bowl, led the NFL in quarterback rating this year. So that's going to be an interesting matchup with 2 red-hot quarterbacks.
Well, and it was time for Matt Ryan to finally live up to his nickname as Matty Ice. I mean, this is a guy who he'd only been to one other NFC Championship game, which they choked away the early lead to the 49ers. And there was a lot of pressure on him to prove that he could be that elite quarterback that many thought he could be. And deserve that MVP award that many assume he's going to get from the regular season. Sure, it's not based on your postseason performance, but he would like to live up to that a little bit, and I think he was ready for it, and I think Julio Jones was great. They have other good receivers that are stepping up. I mean, their run game didn't even need to be that effective, and that's another strength of this team. I think that offense is just clicking on all cylinders. The real question is, does having this bye week hurt their rhythm?
Yeah, Danny, let's talk a little bit about the bye week because I don't really like it very much, Dan. I think it really throws a lot of the, routine off. And throughout 17 weeks of the season, you have a routine. And there is that 1 week where you get a bye week, Dan, and that bye week is much needed. Every player needs to have that rest. But this bye week in between the championship game, it's not like the bye week it is during the regular season. There's just too many distractions, and Atlanta hasn't been to a Super Bowl since, I believe, it's been a long time. Danny, do you know the exact
late 90s? Yeah, I think it was late 90s when they got smoked by Denver.
Yeah. So, but on the other hand, New England, Tom Brady, this is his 15th season as an NFL pro quarterback, and this is his 7th career. He's going to the Super Bowl for the 7th time. So I believe there's a big advantage for New England because they've been through this week off and how to prepare, where Atlanta is going into this like, kids in a candy store. They're very happy. They're excited. I think this is going to be a big advantage for New England, that the experience of the Super Bowl. Do you agree with that, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think the bye week, it kind of depends on the team. I think that's a point I agree with about New England. Belichick has proven after a bye week he's very good. Andy Reid had that great record when he came off of bye week. So there are teams and coaches that do well there. And maybe Atlanta can be that team. I mean, the positive out of having a bye week is you can kind of rest your guys a little bit, let them catch their breath, work off some nagging injuries, and then get focused. But the problem is when you are a younger team like Atlanta, or just a team that's not ready for this limelight, it just knocks you off your rhythm. And you see it time and time again. That's why, Dallas, not that they played badly against Green Bay, but, they got off to a slow start, and that's why they ended up losing the game. They had to fight their way back, and they couldn't complete the full comeback, even though I believe they took the lead, but they at least tied it. But it's kind of to depend on the team, and I don't think we know what to expect out of Atlanta. I think Dan Quinn has done a great job, and it is possible that maybe they won't be too excited for this bye week, that it's going to kind of knock them off the rhythm. But on the other hand, maybe they're ready for this. Maybe they are using this time to prepare better, to study, because as we know, New England is one of the hardest teams to game plan for.
Yeah, you're not kidding. They've got so many different weapons, Danny, and we're going to talk a little bit more about New England here. Let's finish up our thoughts on the NFC Championship game there, and I really thought that what the key to the game was Atlanta's defense. Atlanta's defense had gone into that game. They had 25th in the NFL, and Dan Quinn, who is a defensive guru, we knew that. He came from Seattle, and he did a great job in Seattle. That's why he was awarded a head coaching job here in Atlanta. He did a nice job of mixing up the blitzes, and they were using a lot of secondary and second and third level blitzes, and it caught Green Bay completely off guard. I don't expect that they're going to have that kind of a success against New England, especially with this week off. Belichick, like you mentioned, with that 2 weeks off, I think Belichick's going to be ready for that. My real concern was Atlanta's defense, and I thought they did a marvelous job against Green Bay. Basically, Atlanta's offense has been good all season. Their defense was a question mark. And going into this game, to me, it was a huge question mark. And the first time they had played, Danny, Atlanta had escaped with a 33-32 victory. They had scored a touchdown right in the last minute of the game to upset Green Bay. And I figured it was going to be that type of game again. And I just give a lot of credit to the defense of Atlanta. They are really starting to play much better. They don't look like a 25th ranked team anymore in the NFL. They look like they're starting to understand their roles, and a lot of these young players they have are really starting to do a good job. And I believe there's 2 players on that defense that have a chance to become Rookie of the Years, and that's the linebacker Deion Jones and the safety Keanu Neal. Both of them led the NFL rookies in tackles, 106 and 105, respectively. And they're young. They're rookies, Dan. And now you're going to go to the biggest game of your life and in the Super Bowl. It kind of reminds me a little bit about the old 49ers back when. And Danny, I know you're a young man, so you might not even remember this.
No,
but
I know what kind of guys you're talking about. I'll tell you this with Atlanta. Their defense has stepped up, and that's what it takes to win the Super Bowl. I mean, there's that old adage, defense wins championships. But in the end, even if you're a offensively focused team, you're going to need to be able to make stops. I mean, we saw that Denver Broncos team a few years ago with the number 1 offense in the NFL. I think Manning had 55 touchdown passes, and they got utterly smoked by Seattle in the Super Bowl. And then you look at last year, they suddenly change it to their number 1 defense, and they're playing Carolina, who had a great offense. The next thing you know, they win a low-scoring game because their defense was able to slow them down. So Atlanta, their defense is going to have to be able to make plays against Tom Brady. I think their offense is always going to be the strength of that team, and it helps set the tone for their defense, but their defense is still going to have to be on point. And I'll tell you this, though. I know you talked about some of the young guys. They are good, but for me, Defensive Rookie of the Year is Joey Bosa.
Yes. Danny, he is definitely one of the candidates, and he didn't even play a full season, Dan, and I believe he had 4 sacks in his first 2 games as a professional, and he's absolutely a fantastic young player. And later on, Dan, let's talk a little bit about the new L.A. Chargers. But just to finish up my last thoughts on that game there between the Packers and the Falcons there, another thing that I was very impressed was the offensive line for Atlanta. They protected Matt Ryan very well. Green Bay could not get any type of pass rush on Matty Ice, and they're going to need to protect Matt Ryan against the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots have a much better secondary than the Green Bay Packers did, and you had mentioned earlier, Dan, and I was happy to see Julio Jones back. He had that turf toe that was somewhat of a concern. He didn't practice all week there against the Packers before the game, and looked great in the game. 9 receptions, 180 yards. He caught 2 touchdown passes. But we know this. Belichick is going to take away their number 1 weapon, Julio Jones. That's what Belichick does. He's going to make the Atlanta Falcons play left-handed. And let's talk a little bit now about that AFC game, because I think this is going to transition right into that. And in that AFC Championship game, we all knew that Pittsburgh's fine receiver, Antonio Brown, was going to be an impact. But New England just said, you know what, we're going to take him out of the game. And he caught some passes. He wasn't shut out. But in that game against Pittsburgh, the Steelers' young receivers, Danny, they just let the Steelers down. Ben had a pretty good game, I thought, Dan.
Yeah, their receivers were choking. I mean, we saw a lot of bad drops, plays that could have been touchdowns that really changed the game. I think what helped New England and hurt Pittsburgh was Le'Veon Bell getting hurt, because I think that was really what was strengthening their offense, was their ability to run the ball, not just for like 100 yards, but 150 or so yards each of the playoff games. And then suddenly with him out, suddenly they could focus a little more on stopping Antonio Brown, even though Malcolm Butler is already a good cover corner. But with Bell out, suddenly that lessens the weapons that Pittsburgh has. And I think once New England had that lead on them, they didn't know what to do. And it's suddenly they're forced into these passing situations, and they couldn't take advantage of it because clearly their other receivers were not ready to make plays.
Yeah, and Dan, I concur with you 100% there. Le'Veon Bell had been really the star of all the playoffs so far. And when he went down early in the game there, Ben Roethlisberger had to step up. And up until that game last week against the Patriots, I didn't think Ben Roethlisberger was really at the top of his game. But in that game, Ben did something that I thought was pretty amazing. He had a consecutive streak of pass completions that I believe reached 12 or 13, Dan. And the pass that was finally dropped was a beautiful pass that he had dropped over the defensive back into the arms of his receiver in the end zone that, as you mentioned, the receiver dropped, Danny, and it would have been 7 points for the Steelers. And it was a big drop in the game. And there were several other ones that I thought, these young receivers are just not stepping up. And I had heard Ben mention something, I believe, Danny, it was yesterday, Tuesday, possibly Monday, where he thought, and you very rarely hear a quarterback say this, he had said that the game may have been a little too big for some players, and he said that he thought they got out-coached. Did you hear that, Danny?
I think I heard a little bit about that. I don't think Mike Tomlin cares that much. Ben has already proven this year. He says things that can rattle the cage. I think he thought they were getting practiced too hard, at least by Tomlin. But I think when it comes to the receivers, I think it was proven the moment was too big for them. I mean, you can't have drops like that. Balls hitting you in the hands on big plays. You have to catch that. I mean, when you're a professional receiver, that's your job, and you have to make those plays. And when you're in the AFC Championship game, your job is that much more important. And if you can't make those plays, then really what's the point of you being out there?
Yeah. Danny, I agree. Passes that are right to you, there's no excuse. I mean, if you're having to make a great catch, then there's possibly some question about that. And, Ben was fabulous. I really thought that was a great game for Ben Roethlisberger, and there was a lot of pressure on him after Le'Veon went out. He was 31 for 47, threw for 314 yards, one touchdown pass. He did throw one interception, but that was the fourth career postseason game that Ben's thrown for over 300 yards, and he passes Terry Bradshaw on one of the great Steeler quarterbacks. And, I heard yesterday, I mentioned to you, Ben had a conference, and he had kind of talked a little bit about possibly retiring. And if it's not next year, it's going to be the year after that. And I really am a big fan of Ben Roethlisberger. I love how he stands in the pocket there, Danny, and he feels pressure, but he doesn't really panic. And, he had a marvelous game, and I was disappointed in the outcome there. New England had beaten up Pittsburgh pretty good. The final score was 36-17, and there was some opportunities for Pittsburgh. And both the games, Danny, the scores were lopsided. And when going into that, both the AFC and NFC conference championship games, I really believed that those were the two best teams in each of the conferences and expected a much closer battle. It just, in that point, it was disappointing now, Dan. And I think, what have we had? 12 playoff games, Danny? I'm not sure the exact total amount up to now, but I think
it's 10. But I would agree. I mean, the only thing that could have made it different is maybe if Dallas had played Atlanta, maybe Dallas would have had a better game plan for how to beat them. But you're right. I mean, those games were terrible, and these were supposed to be some of the best teams, and the gap between these teams was obvious.
Yeah, I think, Danny, out of the 10 games, there's been two that were really competitive. Obviously, the Green Bay last-second field goal over Dallas, that was a fabulous game. I mean, anybody that watched that game was excited either way if you were voting for Dallas or rooting for Green Bay. And then, the game that night between Pittsburgh and the Kansas City Chiefs, the Chiefs lost 18-16, but they had scored a touchdown late in the game. They went for the two-point conversion, Danny, and converted it, but there was a holding penalty, and after that they weren't able to make it from the 12-yard line. But other than that, the games have been disappointing, and Right now, the odds makers have installed the New England Patriots as a 3-point favorite in this Super Bowl. And by golly, I'm hoping the game turns out to be a close game, Danny, because it's the last game of the season and really starving for a little more excitement out of the NFL playoffs here.
Yeah, I have a fear this is going to be a blowout. I think if New England really has a method to stopping Atlanta, then they're going to blow them out. While if Atlanta can do what they've been doing against teams like Green Bay and Seattle, if they get their offense going, I don't think New England can keep up. So I have a fear. I know New England, I believe, was a 3-point favorite, at least at the outset. I have a feeling this is going to be a blowout. I don't want it to be a blowout, but I have a feeling it will be.
Wow, Dan, I hope you're wrong there. I just
Me
want
too.
I really want a competitive Super Bowl. It's such a great game, and everybody's watching it. It's one of the most watched games on television every single year, and I'm just looking for a competitive game. I really like New England in this game, Dan. I really think that all the intangibles, the experience. The greatest coach, I believe, is Bill Belichick in NFL history. I believe Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback in NFL history. And I really love this kid, Chris Hogan. He's really fun to watch. His nickname is 7-Eleven. I mean, the kid's open 24/7. I love that. And he's just kind of emerged, Dan, as a game breaker. I mean, he's got speed. He's able to get downfield and beat the defensive backs, and they just have so many weapons with Julian Edelman and their running backs, LeGarrette Blount and Deion James. Deion Lewis, right? Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah. You're all good.
I just love their offense. They're just so hard to. You cannot focus on anybody. And with Tom Brady, the best quarterback ever, I think definitely like New England in this game. I'm hoping Atlanta's going to come with something that raw energy, Danny, the raw energy, the first time to the Super Bowl. I hope it doesn't overwhelm the players because this is a stage that a lot of these players have never been on, and it's tough, Dan. I mean, I've played a lot of sports, and believe me, when you get into big games, it takes a lot of gut check there, to step up under the lights, the bright lights. So. Here's a couple of things I wrote down, though, Dan, and I would like you to comment on these for the keys for Atlanta. And I focused on Atlanta a lot because, like I say, I believe it's a tough battle for them. But one thing Atlanta has been doing a very good job of, I believe that for 8 consecutive games, Danny, that they've got a touchdown on their first drive of the game. And I think that's going to be important for Atlanta to get ahead of the Patriots. The Patriots have played ahead most this season. I think there was a stat they put up, Dan, that they've been ahead in 84% of the games that they're leading in at all times. So do something to the Patriots that hasn't been done to them. Get them behind and make them play catch up. The other thing I
think
go ahead.
I was going to say, Nick, I agree. I think that's the key for the game for Atlanta. As I said, their defense gets going when their offense gets going. And if their offense can't get off to a good start, I could see them falling behind quickly. And I don't know if they're a team as good as their passing offense is. I don't know if it works as well when they're trying to come back by a couple scores. And I did want to make sure. So you said that you think Tom Brady, if he wins, would be the greatest quarterback ever. I just want to make sure because I know you're a Niners fan, and I feel like it's almost blasphemy to not say it's Joe Montana.
Well, they're tied right now. Okay, they're tied right now, and if he gets that 5th Super Bowl ring, the ring for his thumb there, I think there's no doubt you have to give it to Tom Brady. In 15 years, Danny, he's been to the Super Bowl.
No, I'm with you, Nick. I'm with you. I'm just giving you grief.
No, I loved Joe Montana. Believe me, it was so fun to watch the Niners back in the 80s. They were just every week. They're like the Patriots are now, Danny. If you can relate to that, the Patriots have been a force here for, I don't know, the last 15 years since Tom Brady got on the team there. They've just emerged as each year they're the perennial team to beat and to go to the Super Bowl. And I just love Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. I think they're a great combination. I'm so happy that in my lifetime I've got to watch this because I've got to see Joe Montana and Bill Walsh, who I believe Bill Walsh was a great coach. He just didn't have a long enough tenure to get the greatest coach. We can't say he was the greatest coach because I don't think he coached long enough, Danny. So,
sure. No, I think Bill Walsh is one of the top 5 ever. But I think when it comes to innovators, though, he's one of the best. I'd say he's up there with, the Don Coryells and people like that.
Yeah, and the West Coast offense, I think, Coach Walsh was the one that really started the West Coast offense and helped promote it quite a bit. So a couple of the other things I think that may help Atlanta, they need to pressure Tom Brady. Last week versus Green Bay, they did a great job, as we mentioned, about the second and third level blitzes. I don't think that's going to work this week. I think their Patriots are going to be ready for that. They're going to have to get a little more pass rush from their down 4 linemen, their 4 down linemen. And the one thing that I was just really perplexed last week when Pittsburgh was playing New England, they seemed to take the opposite approach against the Patriots, Danny. Sometimes they were only rushing 3, and they weren't able to get any pressure on Tom Brady. And I believe that's the exact wrong strategy against Tom Brady. You have to force Tom Brady out of his comfort zone, try to get him down on the ground, similar to what the Houston Texans did in their playoff game. And if Atlanta's going to have any success, they're going to need to pressure Tom Brady and possibly get him out of his comfort zone. Absolutely. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can say it about all quarterbacks, but especially someone like Brady. He's not the most mobile guy, and he's someone where once he gets in that rhythm and he's comfortable, you've lost.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of way Peyton Manning was when he was in his prime. You let him get in a rhythm, you don't knock him off his spots, you're screwed. He's beaten you then. And I think what's key for Atlanta is getting pressure on him, knocking him out of his comfort zone, but doing it deceptively. If you're constantly blitzing multiple guys and he's reading it, then it's moot. You got to find something else. I mean, you have to find ways to deceive him, or if you're lucky, maybe not even have to blitz and you can rely on your front 4. But you're going to need to find smart ways to pressure him because you have to knock him off his spot one way or another. But if he's reading you, then it's really not making that much of a difference. If anything, it's making it harder for yourself.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Dan. And that we mentioned that the Falcons had the 25th ranked NFL in the NFL, their defense, and their pass defense was actually worse, Danny. It was 28th versus the pass. So they're going to have to step it up, and they have been. I really believe that Atlanta has started to play much better on defense, and that's why they've had success. And here's one thing that Atlanta's done a great job of. They've been able to force turnovers throughout the season. They have a way better turnover ratio of plus than minus, and they're going to need to win the turnover battle here against the Patriots. The Patriots are notorious for keeping the ball. They don't give up turnovers. They get turnovers similar to the Falcons. In this game, the Falcons, if they have any chance of winning, they have to win the turnover battle, and that's going to be key for them. And then on offense, Danny, Matt Ryan has been hot. He's been red hot. And when you see a quarterback like Matt Ryan and the conversion rate that the Falcons have right now on third down is unbelievable, Dan. Did you see that stat in the Green Bay game, Danny? I mean,
they were on fire from third down, to say the least.
And that is such an important down in the NFL. If you can convert third downs, keep the ball and continue to drive, and keep the other team off the field, that is the key to winning the game. And that's going to be the key here for Atlanta. They're going to have to do a better job on defense of getting the Patriots off the field on third down. And again, they're going to have to convert third downs themselves. And if they do that, I think Atlanta's going to have a good opportunity to keep this game close and take it to the fourth quarter. If they can keep the game close, take it to the fourth quarter where it's anybody's game, I think everybody's going to be happy about that. And I can tell you this, I am certainly going to be really happy about that because the Super Bowl is the last game of the season, Dan, and I really like to have a lot of fun. People have parties. There's
nothing worse than having a blowout for a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You've been preparing for it all season. You have 2 weeks of where you know the teams, and for it to be a blowout, it's really one of the biggest bummers of the year.
Yeah, it is a big bummer, Danny. I like that word. Well, here's the keys for the Patriots, Dan. Protect Tom Brady. Last game against the Steelers, they did a great job. The Steelers got very little pressure on Brady, as we mentioned. Okay, they need to run the football. I think the Falcons in this game are going to defend the pass. I think that they know that the Patriots have a great passing attack. They're going to be loaded for the pass, and I think New England's going to need to run the football. I think they're going to be able to gouge Atlanta if they do. Again, they need to win the turnover battle. And here's the key, if you ask me, on defense. Those running backs of Atlanta do a lot of pass catching, Dan. They're very good out of the backfield. Freeman and I think the other back is named Coleman. Yep, they do a good job of catching passes, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on the linebackers for the Patriots. And I wonder if they're up to that, because it's hard, Danny, for a 230, 240, 50-pound linebacker to stay with those little running backs of the Falcons. You know, they're very fast, they're elusive. That could be a key for Atlanta if they can get the ball to those little running backs out in space, and they can do some damage one-on-one against the linebackers for the Patriots. So the Patriots are going to have to do a good job of covering them. I believe the running backs, Freeman and Coleman, caught 85 total passes this year, and that's a lot for running backs to catch passes from a quarterback. So, again, Dan, the third down efficiency, I think that's important. New England needs to convert, and they need to get Atlanta off. We know Atlanta's very strong on third downs. And possibly the biggest one here, Dan, in that first game of the season, of the playoffs, when Atlanta was playing Seattle, I think Seattle exposed something, and that was the return teams for Atlanta. Remember in that game, Danny, Devin Hester for the Seattle Seahawks, he had almost 200 yards of return yardage. Possibly that's going to be somewhere that the Patriots can exploit the Falcons. That on their coverage teams weren't very good, Danny, and I don't think they are very good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I think we both kind of hit on in the end is the team that kind of controls the game, the one that can really impose their will, play their style of football, and avoid making mistakes. I think that's who's going to win. I know that seems simplistic, but when you have two teams like this that can totally dominate you offensively with defenses that are talented enough to make plays, it's just going to come down to who's the one who can set their will right away. And, I think both these teams, while talented offensively, they're the kinds of teams that if they have a two-possession lead or so, it's hard to come back against them.
Now, Danny, I'm going to disagree with you. The two-possession lead is 2 touchdowns, 14 points, let's say, or 16, Dan, right, with the 2-point conversions. I think with the offenses that these teams have, Danny, I don't think 2 possessions, unless it's the fourth quarter and it's getting late, Dan, I believe 2 possessions is not a problem for either one of these teams. Now, New England has not played behind with very much this season, and I don't believe Atlanta has either. They have some losses. They are on a 5-game winning streak, or what is it? They've won 6 games right now consecutively. New England, after defeating Pittsburgh, they've won 7 consecutive games. Both these teams have played ahead a lot, but I don't think two possessions is a problem for these offenses. More importantly to me, Dan, I think in the red zone, these offenses have to score touchdowns because they're both such high-potency offenses that if you're going to settle for field goals in the red zone, that could become a problem for you by the end of the game. So red zone offense and red zone defense to me could be more of important than a couple of scores down. You know what I mean, Dan? I think that to me is going to...
Well, sure, but I think that plays into the same point, though. I mean, if you keep settling for field goals instead of touchdowns, you're going to let them pull further and further away. And you're right about the offenses. They can score. I guess my feeling is defensively, those two teams feast off of their offenses having control. And in the last month or so, each of those teams has always been in control of every game.
Yeah.
So when they're not in control of a game, that's when it's going to be interesting to see if you can come back. Even if your offense is as highly ranked as it can be, look what happened to Green Bay.
Yeah, that's very true, Dan. You know, the offense, that's why they've been saying for years, Danny, and you said it earlier in the podcast here, defenses win championships. And whoever defense in this game plays better will probably win the game. Most likely are going to. Even though that the offenses are so similar and so very potent, but I think you're right. The defense that stands up in this game does a good job in the red zone, does a good job on third down conversions, getting the other team off the field. I think that's going to be the team that wins. And I really believe it's going to be New England, Dan. I really can't predict a score right now, and I'm going to be interested to hear what your idea is on the score. But before you give us that score, Dan, though, I think this is an interesting I wanted to bring this up to you. You know, I mentioned earlier that these were the number 1 and 2 quarterbacks with the best total QBRs this season. And in one other Super Bowl, it was in Super Bowl 44 in 2006, 2 quarterbacks with the number 1 and 2 QBR ratings, Drew Brees for the New Orleans Saints, and the Colts had Peyton Manning. They squared off in that game, Danny. And it was a heck of a ball game. The Saints ended up beating the Colts 31-17. So that doesn't happen often where you get the 2 best quarterbacks squaring off, Danny. And I think that's going to be pretty cool in this game. I'm excited about that. And
I'm with you there. I mean, it should be exciting. If you want my pick, I think New England wins. And while I want it to be close, maybe it's close in the first quarter or so, I think New England ends up winning this game. Let's go 45-21.
Wow, 45-21. That's a lot of points there. That'd be fun. But I don't like that score. Yeah, that score is a little too lopsided for me, Danny. And like I mentioned, I really do like the Patriots to win this game. I don't really want to predict a score right now. I've got a couple of other shows I'm doing, Dan, and I want to save it for my shows there. But I want to throw out a couple of stats here for listeners that might be thinking about maybe throwing $1 or $2 down on this ball game, Dan. And I might want to help them kind of direct them in the right direction. There's been 5 previous Super Bowls where the number 1 scoring offense has gone up against the number 1 scoring defense. And this year, Atlanta's offense was the number 1 scoring offense, and New England's defense was the number 1 scoring defense. They allowed the fewest points in the NFL. And in these Super Bowls, in the 5 previous one, the defense has dominated and won 4 out of the 5 games. So, again, that bodes well for anybody wanting to put their money on the New England Patriots. I did want to let you know that the only team that did win that game that had the scoring offense was the San Francisco 49ers. They defeated Denver in 1989, and they defeated them pretty badly, I believe.
Pretty badly, as I recall, yeah.
55-10, I believe. So, I think one of our goals in this podcast, Dan, is to help any listener that was thinking about maybe wanting to make a friendly bet with their neighbor or anybody who they might want to throw $1 or $2 on to help them make the right bet, Dan. And how can you bet against Tom Brady and Bill Belichick? I believe it's pretty hard, and right now the spread is only 3. I'm basically telling anybody jump on that 3 right now and lay the 3, okay, is what I'm saying, Danny. And I believe you said the same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, with Bill Belichick, you give him 2 weeks to prepare. As good as Atlanta is, I think that's tough to make up. And you look at the 2 Super Bowls he lost, it was both to the Giants, and each time it was their D-line that I think helped create problems for New England. Not that there wasn't any other help. Clearly, Eli Manning was very hot, but what the big key was having their strong defensive line get to Tom Brady, and I don't think Atlanta has a good enough pass rush that can do it at least consistently. I think they need a nice lead to be able to really play their game defensively.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, Dan, I'm not going to predict a score, but I am going to say take New England and lay the 3. Okay. So there you go. So, and Danny, you like New England big. So, hey, Danny, let's talk a little bit about some things happening there in San Diego. The Chargers have announced now that they're going to move to L.A. and they're going to become the L.A. Chargers. I was a little bit interested in their logo, Dan. I saw their new logo, and I thought, wow, it looks kind of familiar.
Well, which logo, Nick? They had like 3 different logos in 48 hours before they admitted that they were never going to change it.
Okay, well, the one I saw, and I don't believe I've seen more than just one, Dan, but the one I saw looked a lot like the L.A. Dodgers logo. I mean, it was a little bit different, but it was very close. Is that the one?
Yeah, that was the initial one they came out with the day they moved. And then the next day, it was the same thing, except the colors were they had the powder blue background with a yellow fill for the letters, which of course was UCLA's colors. And then they made the same color scheme, but just had it say Los Angeles Chargers. And then a couple days later, just went back to the lightning bolt. And I think it was either A.G. Spanos or John Spanos tried to say that, we were never going to change our logo. We were always sticking with that. It was a temporary thing. And everyone's kind of laughing about it because I'd be surprised if it was supposed to be a temporary thing because everyone just made fun of their logo. Not just people like us, but even other sports teams' Twitter feeds.
Well, it's always good to make fun of the Chargers, okay? Especially when you're a Raiders fan down here like I am, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say it's an easy one for you.
Well, Dan, there's a lot of talk about the Raiders are going to move to Las Vegas, and now that the Chargers have moved out of San Diego, is there any talk about the Chargers wanting to acquire the Oakland Raiders or go, bid for them to come there and take over where the Chargers left?
I think there's a little bit, but it's minimal. Most people just believe the Raiders are going to be in Vegas, which I believe too. I think the deal they have there is too good. I think the issue if he came to San Diego, Mark Davis, is that they still don't have a new stadium there. So even though he'd have a place to play, he would still have to be working through getting a new stadium. And I think San Diego, unlike Oakland, would work with him, which was something the Spanos family clearly didn't do. But I think at this point, the Raiders seem like the perfect spot for them is in Vegas. And actually, recently, in the last couple of days, an investment group has come together, and they actually are making a bid to buy the Mission Valley land, which is where Qualcomm is, and they're going to turn it into kind of this sports district. They're going to build a stadium that will be maybe 30 to 40,000 or so that could be good for an MLS team, as well as a new stadium for San Diego State football, but also leave room to possibly build an NFL stadium in the future, which would be very funny because that would be exactly what the Chargers would want. But I guess, they say they exhausted all their efforts, yet they seem to not know anything about these guys who've clearly been working for a long time on this. So even so for Mark Davis, I think right now San Diego is still in a spot where they're not looking to get an NFL team right now. They're looking to find other means to kind of help fill the void for now and help figure out what they want to do with the Mission Valley area.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I believe you're right about the Raiders. They are going to Las Vegas. It won't be next year. It'll be 2 years. And excuse me,
Right.
There's a lot of talk around here, Dan. It's very prevalent about the Raiders should boycott next season's games, that they shouldn't go to the games. They know that the Raiders are a
You
lame.
the fans?
Yes, that they should not go to the games. A lot of people are talking about that, trying to promote that. And I understand it completely, Dan. If you're a diehard Raider fan and your team's leaving you and you're a season ticket holder, why would you want to go to the games? I mean, yes, you can watch them on TV, but you could send a message to Mark Davis and the Raiders that, you know what, you don't like this at all, that this is really, you screwed your fans and you're leaving. So look for that to happen, Dan. I don't know if the Raiders are going to get many sellouts next year because I believe there will be a good high percentage of fans that say, I'm not going to go to the game. So look for that.
I'll tell you what, Nick, I think that's a fair point about how angry fans will be, but the one thing that I think could cause an issue there is that there are a lot of Raider fans, and I mean a lot. They have one of the largest fan bases of any NFL team. So even if a lot of people in Oakland aren't necessarily going to go, you could get people from other areas that want to go, or even just Raider fans that don't care whether the team is moving or not because they're going to go to their games. I mean, the Raiders, they have such a big fan base that even though a lot of people in Oakland may attempt to boycott it, it still may not have a big enough impact.
Well, I think you're right, Dan. Everybody likes to wear silver and black. A lot of people look good in silver and black, okay? I know I like to wear it myself, right, Danny. So you got a good point there, Dan. Dan, you know what? The Chargers fired their coach, and pretty disappointed about that. I didn't know if you knew this, but the head coach there he lives in Novato here.
Mike McCoy, I didn't know that.
Yep. Mike McCoy makes his residence here in Novato here, right over here in Northern California. And I really thought that the 49ers should have at least given him a cup of coffee and had him come in and talk to him. I think he was a very good coach, Dan. I really liked Mike McCoy. And I thought this year he proved it, okay, with all the receivers.
I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one, Nick. I think Mike McCoy is a good coordinator. I don't think he's a good head coach. If you look at his record in fourth quarter games or just any close game, their record was well under 500. His inability to use timeouts correctly, his division record was poor. There were just a lot of issues wrong there. And I think especially for the Niners, they need somebody new and different. That's a team that's looking to rebuild, and Mike McCoy is, I would say, just another kind of lame duck hire like the last two coaches they've had.
All right. Well, Dan, listen, when you talk, I listen, and I don't know a lot about Mike McCoy. I really don't. I just thought he did a good job because the Chargers looked like they were depleted. They didn't have any receivers, and when we got to watch the Chargers play the Raiders, they were very competitive, and I thought, he's getting the most out of his players. But I didn't get to watch him every game like you did, Dan, and if you're telling me that he wasn't a very good coach, then I'm going to believe you, Danny. And but I still would have liked to have had an opportunity, the 49ers, to at least speak to him. And I know the 49ers are going to get Kyle Shanahan. It looks like a done deal. After the Super Bowl, he will become the 49ers head coach. And I know that the L.A. Chargers, see, I almost made a mistake, said San Diego.
Oops.
Yeah. The L.A. Chargers have now hired a new coach, and let's listen to his press conference. His name is Anthony Lynn.
Folks, I am pumped out to be the head coach. L.A. Chargers. Oops.
Yeah. See, Danny, listen, it's going to take a little time for everybody to get used to saying the L.A. Chargers, right? I mean, there's the head coach.
That was so perfect, too, because I think for all San Diego Charger fans, it was really a shot to the Spanos so that it's like even your head coach can't even really realize your team isn't even in there. It just doesn't work. The name L.A. Chargers, everyone thinks of it as the San Diego Chargers, and this idea that they were there for 1 year. Okay, no one really remembers that. No one ever really went to those games. And, the joke I keep hearing is people saying, oh, man, there are L.A. Charger fans up there. I don't know what you people are talking about. And I keep joking. I'm sure there are Jaguar fans up there. It doesn't mean the Jacksonville Jaguars should move there.
Very good, Dan. Danny, tell us a little bit about Anthony Lynn. What have you heard about him?
Well, he's had a great year, to say the least. At the beginning of the season, he was just the running back coach for Buffalo. And then, of course, after, I believe, week 2, they fired their offensive coordinator. So he was promoted to offensive coordinator. And Rex Ryan was fired with a week to go in the regular season. And then he was promoted to interim head coach. So he's had a pretty good year. He's kind of the odd one, ironically, of the people the Chargers interviewed because most of the coaches they interviewed were defensive guys. Mike Smith, Matt Patricia, Sean McDermott, people like that. And then Dave Taub was a special teams coach from the Chiefs. So he was really the lone offensive guy. And most people believe it was Mike Smith's job, but he decided to decline it and stick with Tampa. But with Lynn, I mean, he definitely seems to have a good passion to him. His interest in running the ball may be a positive, especially with the year Melvin Gordon put together. It's going to be interesting to see with the Chargers because I think they're in a spot where you're trying to figure out where they're going because they've had a lot of injuries, but you wonder if it was a training staff issue, if it's just these guys are always going to be hurt, Or even if they're healthy, are they really that good? And, Rivers only has so much time left that, if you're Anthony Lynn, you got to try to utilize him as best as possible, because at some point you're going to need to get a new quarterback in there, and it's going to be soon.
Yeah, Dan, speaking of Phillip Rivers, there was a little talk for a while back that somebody had said that Phillip Rivers might be interested in playing for the San Francisco 49ers. Did you hear anything about that?
The trade rumors?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he and others have tried to say there's nothing there. I'm always a big believer that when there's smoke, there's fire. So he must have said something that implied to people that he had interest in being traded. It doesn't mean he was serious about it, but I think he is questioning. I think he's trying to be a good teammate and good soldier, but I don't think he wanted to go to LA. He's a San Diego kind of guy. He has a big family. I don't think he wants to move up to LA, but he's going to, when he's in front of the media, he's always going to be the perfect guy. He's always going to say good things and be a good teammate and a good player for his owners. But I do think that there's a feel to want to see what else is out there. The thing is, though, he has a no trade clause, so he has to be able to approve anywhere he goes. And, while I think San Francisco is a great city, even though they play technically in Santa Clara, that's a team that I think is in even more trouble than the Chargers are when it comes to personnel and where the team is going.
Yeah. Danny, you're right. There is a lot of problems here at San Francisco, but here's the key. They do have a very high draft pick. I believe they're going to be the number two draft pick, and maybe that would be something that the Chargers would be wanting to do, was to trade Phillip Rivers for a very high draft pick and get a new college and a new college quarterback and some new players. I think the 49ers right now, there's a lot of talk about Kirk Cousins coming here, and there was a little rumor about Phillip Rivers, but I thought he had said no, he didn't say that, and kind of snafooed it a little bit. But, Dan, I would like to talk about the San Diego State running back, Donnell Pumphrey. He set a college record. He's the rushing leader, and the 49ers have a number 2 draft pick. Is he the type of player that the 49ers should look at as a number 2 first-round pick?
Oh, God, no. I don't want to sound too mean there, but no. Pumphrey's a great college player, but he's at best a third-round pick. That is not the kind of guy they should go after. Pumphrey hits me as kind of a Danny Woodhead-style player. An effective player when put in the right system, but he's not a guy who I would be putting a first-round lottery pick on. That's a real stretch there. He's a guy who would be good in a good system, but no, for the Niners, they need to stick with some of these high-level players, guys that really are ready to be NFL players, and Donnell Pumphrey really fits more of a niche.
Okay, well, Dan, I just saw that he had set the record there, 2,133 yards this season, and he looks like he's an all-purpose back. Looks like he can catch the football, but remember I told you, when you talk, I listen, and if the Niners shouldn't go after him in the first round, I believe the Niners are going to try to use that first pick to get Kirk Cousins, and I know that would be what the Niners.
You mean trade him for? You mean trade him for Cousins?
Yes, I believe they're going to need to trade him. To Washington there.
And by the way, I don't mean to sound too hard on Pumphrey. He's a great kid, but when you look at him with SDSU, they were a run-heavy team. He could catch it in the backfield, but that really wasn't what they did, nor did he return kicks. He's someone that if the Niners have a pick in the middle to late rounds, he's someone you could look at, depending on what they're looking to do at running back. But if you're San Francisco, you've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are high on Deshaun Watson. If the Niners, maybe if they want him, if he's available at number 2, that might be another guy they could go with. Yeah,
the Clemson quarterback that won the national title here this year. Danny, nice job, okay? You always bring it to the 10th inning. Appreciate having you on very much. And the listeners can follow Danny on Twitter at SportsReiter12. That's SportsReiter12. And the 10th inning now, Danny, is now on iTunes and Google Play. And you can check out the 10th inning with Nick Mattos on our Facebook page now, the 10th inning. And we really want all the listeners to go on to and give us a good review on Google Play or iTunes, whichever they listen to. So thank you so much for joining us here today, Dan, on the 10th inning with Nick Mattos.